Hello and welcome back to another Made with Love tutorial, and today I'm going to be showing you the difference between garter stitch and stockinette stitch, sometimes known as stocking stitch. As you can see here, we have two different swatches of knitting, and they look very different, and that's because they are using different stitching and different knitting techniques. On the left here, this is garter stitch, where you knit every row. So you would knit a row, knit, 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 and it creates this garter stitch bumpy effect. Now here is a stockinette or stocking stitch, which essentially is knitting across one row and then purling on the other side. And then we knit one row and purl one row, creating this lovely flat texture with these V's that are creating the stockinette stitch. Now, they're both beautiful and both used in different ways for different projects, but there is a big difference between the garter stitch and the stockinette stitch. Okay?
How to count rows in stockinette stitch.
Okay. Here we have, I'm going to take that out of the way. Here we have a swatch in stockinette or stocking stitch, and I'm going to show you how you can count your rows. Now, underneath these stitches, can you see these little V's here? Those V's are rows, essentially. So if you count the V's on your way down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 10 rows of stockinette stitch, because for every V is a row, and it's as simple as that, and that's how you can keep track of how many rows you've completed. Okay?
How to stockinette stitch.
Okay. Stockinette stitch is using a combination of knit stitches and purl stitches. Now, if you don't know how to knit stitch or purl stitch, I do have tutorials of how to do that. But essentially, to stockinette stitch, on this side, which is considered to be the right side where you see the V's, we are going to knit across. So usually in your patterns, when you start stockinette stitch, you'll start with a knitting row. So you knit every stitch as you've done probably before. And if you don't know how to do that, I do have tutorials. But essentially, a knit stitch is going from the front to the back, from the left to the right. So from the left side of the first stitch through to the back, wrap the yarn around, pull through to the front and off your needle. So for stockinette stitch, you just knit one row, like so, all the way to the end. And then once you get to the end of your knit row, you'll turn your work and you'll see that this is the purl row, which is all bumpy. So that's your knit side row, and this is your purl side row. For the purl side row, the difference being that with knitting, we always kept the yarn at the back. For purling, we keep the yarn at the front and we go from the back to the front of the stitch. So we go from the back to the front, wrap our yarn around, take the yarn to the back and pull it off. And we're going to purl all the way across this row. And purling across this row creates that flat texture on the front with those V's. And as you can see, is continuous purl stitches across this row. And when you get to the other side, you get ready to turn your work and start your next row with a knit stitch with your working yarn at the back of your work. And there we have stockinette stitch. And you'll continue all the way, knitting one row, purling one row, knit one row, purl one row. And that creates this lovely V-shape texture. Thank you for watching that Made with Love tutorial. I hope it was useful to you. But if you need any more help with your knitting or anything crafty, we have plenty more tutorials where that came from. So for now, keep making with love.